Good morning, everyone. Welcome back to the Explicit Measures podcast with Tommy, Seth, and Mike. Hello, everyone. Just checking in and seeing how things are going with everybody. Well, it was been a bit of a week for us. We've been able to recover. It's amazing what a clean install will do on Windows onto your machine. So that was what I was doing this week after my computer decided to not be happy. So after a clean install, things seem to be working. Knock on wood. We'll see how far we get with this. How you guys doing?
Did you migrate to Windows 11
I
yet, or?
I did not. I was very hesitant. I've been very hesitant. So I would have done it had my machine accepted the ability to take Windows 11. I mean, I had to turn on like this special thing on my computer. I had to have the TPM 2.0 version on our machines. So I have it. It just, when I checked and after I rebuilt my whole machine, basically clean installed Windows 10, it said, hey, we got to go check to see if you can handle Windows 11. And previously I had the checkbox to say, yeah, you could do it. So I'm just kind of waiting for that to come back again. Now that everything's up and running, I don't feel like I want to mess with it again for a little while. I might give it a couple months here to kind of keep going this way without crashes. We'll see what happens.
Yeah, it's been quite the technology week for those in the Midwest. The North Central Power BI server, if your tenants in that region, was down. There were 3 errors on it, or 3 incidents in the Power BI support, basically saying you can't publish, your gateway's probably going to be off, and you can't do any writing either. So no editing, no reading, no API connection at all. So that was also cool yesterday too. So
super fun.
Man, it's a good thing I just moved my stuff a couple months ago off of that capacity. Otherwise, I would have had some unhappy people.
I don't quite exactly know where and why when you start your Power BI for the first time, like the very first time you log into app.powerbi.com, somehow it knows where to make your tenant initially. I thought it was based on where your machine was logging in from, but I don't think that's necessarily true because I just tried it with a client the other day, and now I have to submit a help desk ticket. I just turned on their Power BI, so now I've got to move their Power BI to the environment or the region where they actually have all their other data systems. I don't know where. I don't know how it knows. It must be like where you first log in or where your initial Azure tenant is created or
I think that's what it is.
something weird.
I thought it was first login.
So I thought so
First
too.
login.
So I was sneaky. I thought, okay, if it's first login to Power BI, I'm not going to do first login in the region where the customer lives. I'm going to go make a virtual machine in the region where I want it to live. I logged into the virtual machine, and then in the virtual machine, I went to powerbi.com to say, here I am, make me my tenant in the region that I want, and it did not do it. So maybe I don't understand how it knows what tenant to use. Or maybe someone else visited.
Where you were actually from.
I don't know. I don't know how it would know that if it was going through a VM to do it, but whatever.
Yeah, because for me, I'm my personal tenant's in East Virginia. So, but I think that's when I initially created that tenant. I logged into Power BI for the first time, not necessarily when you create your tenant.
Well, that's what I did. I waited. They didn't have it. They have never logged into Power BI until I did it, and then I tried to, sneakily move my machine to the region where I wanted it to be placed, and it did not work. Gotcha. So maybe I was wrong. Maybe it kind of somehow captured my information.
Sounds like some other way. So sneaky.
No, they outsneaked me. Awesome. So today's topic, if you guys want to jump in,
quick announcement.
Oh yeah, do an announcement. Yeah. We got some announcements today.
So guys, we're asking for your help, and we're also gonna kind of want to give back to you guys. We're doing our first contest. We know how much you guys faithful listeners. So what we're doing is basically a share the podcast contest. All you guys have to do is between now and the end of Wednesday next week, just share on LinkedIn or Twitter the podcast with the hashtag explicit measures. And you can use a special link that I'll send out in the chat as well. And as long as you use the hashtag explicit measures and share the link, we'll basically track and we'll do a random drawing and you win some free swag. So a few caveats there. USA only, just some restrictions with shipping. So you can still partake if you're outside the United States, but the clothing will come at a later date. So that's just a few things we just want to get the word out more. And we think you guys are kind of our best proponent for that. So Yep, between now and Wednesday, which is at some point.
And if you
Almost.
want to see our swag, if you want to see some of the stuff that you
Yeah.
potentially could win, we have a number of Microsoft thumb drives we're going to give away. We can give away a number of those. We also have some Power BI shirts, just regular business intelligence shirts. There's things that I wear, like, they're not my shirts. They're other shirts that have not been worn, but they're like just general Power BI swag shirts. We also have things off of the swag for the swag store from Power BI Tips. So if you go to swag.powerbi.tips, there are items there that if you'd like one of those and you're the winner, we'll send you an item directly from our store. So go take a look at some of the swag items, see if there's anything that you would like, and share and communicate around the Explicit Measures podcast, and you could win.
And you can share as much as you want, but once you get in once, there's no extra votes the more you share. But we always encourage it. So we're gonna try to do this every
Couple weeks.
so often. Yeah,
Yeah.
every so often. But yeah, just want to announce our contest.
Awesome. You too can look like three goofballs on the podcast with tons of Power BI swag. All right, awesome. So with that, another announcement we have coming up, I believe next week, is the Power BI user group for the Milwaukee area user group and Chicago user groups. So we're doing kind of a joint session again. Tommy runs the Chicago Power BI user group. Seth and I co-lead the Milwaukee Power BI user group. I think I'm on the hook for talking. So I think I'm probably going to blabber more about things that I know or have learned. We're going to go deep dive on incremental refresh, how to set it up, what does it do, how to watch it run its procedure, and what does it, how does it build these incremental refreshing things for you. So we're going to do some interesting things there, hopefully do some deep dives and some technical review of what that is doing and how it's working. So stay tuned for that. There'll be more announcements. I think, Tommy, you already have a meetup for it set up in
No, because I have no link. So
no link. So
need
stay
the link
tuned.
on Meetup.
In the next couple days, we'll have links. Awesome.
So
I think that's it for announcements. Anything else come out interesting, gentlemen, for anything blog related for Power BI? I don't think I saw anything that was February. The February release of Power BI Desktop is out. That's basically it. There's a blog announcements around that. So some new features. I am hearing some rumblings of the new format pane is causing people some grief.
It's a hard cutover now, isn't it?
I think it's on now.
Well, you can disable it, but you have to do it manually.
You have to go in and change the advanced
in the preview features.
You have to turn it off,
which I promptly did. So I was like, it's.
So I've been using it. It's definitely harder to find things. Things are actually being renamed. I believe the
effects.
Yeah, some of the effects things are being renamed, which is much harder to find now. It does have a search window, which I do like. You can start searching for things, but if you rename them and then have to search for the things that have been renamed, well, how do you know what the old name was? Like, it doesn't help me at all. So I'm searching for what I remember being there, but it's no longer there anymore. So it befuddles me a little bit to some point. If you are using the February release of Power BI Desktop, go ahead and let us know in the chat window. What are your thoughts on the new filter pane for all the visual property settings? Let us know if you like it. Do you not like it? Give us your impressions. We'd be curious to know what you think as well.
I hear Power BI Tips LinkedIn poll coming.
Oh, yes. We should definitely do one of those. I'll have to find an obscure feature and be like, have you found the new obscure feature inside the new format pane? Yes or no?
Honestly, if I had to pick between the old filter pane and the original color, I still like the dark side panes.
We still want dark mode. I'm with you, Tommy. I want dark mode, man. Everything comes in dark mode nowadays.
They're going there, man. They're going there. It's a snippet of our lost 84 episode.
Mm-hmm.
But there was one thing I did notice, that the Windows app for the consumers of Power BI reports
has a dark
mode.
Really?
Yeah. I was like, keep it going. Keep it going.
Keep dark mode going.
Yeah. We're almost there.
The other places.
Awesome. I mean, I think that's actually the way of Microsoft Office. I think most of Office, all the Microsoft suite from everything else, that's kind of the direction they're going. Everything has a dark mode or some kind of dark mode with it. Excel, Word, Outlook, all of those guys do. So I would have to imagine this is going to eventually follow suit and follow because it is PowerPoint for data. So PowerPoint has it. Power BI's got to get it at some point.
You're right. And again, PowerPoint also you can separate the window pans
Hey, let's not
and
get too
but
ambitious here, right? Easy
sorry,
there.
yeah.
You know, well, there's only so much time in a day, Tommy.
Right. We're still on air. So sorry.
Exactly. Yeah, we made it past 9-minute mark. Let's keep going. So let's jump over to just some other topical things here. So the topic for today is going to be around what kind of incentives are there for your center of excellence. I think this is a very relevant topic. I'm working with a lot of clients right now that are kind of asking, they're getting started, right? They don't have Power BI established. We're building it for them for the first time. So you kind of really want to have some kind of center of excellence in place here to start building out what your knowledge library looks like for your organization. So I think a couple things first, right? We should probably just define what is the center of excellence, or COE, or how do you guys define it? So maybe we should start there, and then we should talk about how do we get people engaged with it? How do we incentivize people to work with it? Tommy, you want to kick one off here and just kind of give your definition of what you
Yeah.
think a center of excellence is?
I'll give the official definition, but not the one that
I want the
I
Tommy
actually.
definition. I don't want the official one.
You don't want
Anyone can read it somehow
I
off the
still think
internet.
when I hear center of excellence, I still think like a Confluence space or a SharePoint place where the like all the resources are, not a group of people.
Sure.
As defined in the documentation, it's center of excellence is basically the network of community at an organization that's promoting Power BI, the liaison between different pain points, helping train users, and basically kind of everything in between for the adoption, evangelizing the data driven culture, and kind of understand, like, kind of matching up the skills or meeting skills that need to be had at an organization for Power BI.
Okay.
So,
I like that. I think that's a pretty solid definition. Seth, you got anything you want to add to that? Is it something different how you would define your center of excellence?
I mean, those are features and roles that, or I should say, activities, outputs of the team, right? Or individuals.
Mhm.
I think it's one of those things that varies between sizes of the organization, right? Like either, I guess today's conversation is probably in the how do you build it, or join people together that are part of it, versus it being almost a team, because in many cases it can be, right? The BI team could be the
mhm.
COE, because those are activities that they uh, typically would be doing in organizations, but also owning the centralization of data within the organization,
Mhm.
right?
Yep.
Mhm.
To disseminate. So there's some variability in there, right?
So I'm gonna throw some terms in here that are very Microsofty. Microsoft describes it as discipline at the core and flexibility at the edge within inside the center of excellence. So I think I think
I like that.
I think it's a good, right. I mean, it's kind of like act like the business, think like IT. Said a bit more, Microsofty. um, I would probably argue the center of excellence has to comprise at least some people to engage with it, right? I think I think the center of excellence doesn't do anyone any good to just put knowledge into a place. Kind of doesn't really add a lot of
Yeah.
value long term for the company. I mean, you could do a SharePoint page, you can put down documentation information, but I think really what happens is someone needs to own it. Needs to be at least an owner who's going to kind of mature it, maintain it, continually put information in there. A number of years ago, I used to run a call center, and while running the call center, I had the ability to be able to create the knowledge repository, and so I was the maintainer of that knowledge base. Right, I was able to invest my engineering knowledge into that space, and then people are able to pick it up and then use it to answer questions. Right, I think that's really the same thing that the Center of Excellence starts to do, and it may grow larger where you actually have advisory teams and people doing experiments and figuring out what data is relevant and voting on what data needs to be governed and not governed. I mean, I think the Center of Excellence can do a lot more, but I think at its core, you need at least a single person who's going to spearhead or take the ownership of it initially, and then when questions come to that person, right, you can you don't have to answer them directly. You always answer the questions you get through the Center of Excellence. Here's the knowledge base, here's the Q&A section, here's how you use that. And
Yeah.
I think that's a good place to put things, right? I think it's a good best practice.
Well, I think the hardest thing too, the way the adoption roadmap kind of outlines the center of excellence in the kind of the group of people, there's a lot of people there,
Mm,
and and they're really speaking to more focus on the Power BI creators as being part of that center of excellence, or other people creating reports that are not necessarily on BI, but I think unless you're enterprise or a very large organization, a lot of us are still in that stage where there's maybe only 3 to 5 BI creators, and they all already work together closely as it is.
Yep.
Obviously, on each department has their own BI analyst, but at the same time, the center of excellence is really just making sure that everyone's on the same page. To me, it's almost like what Microsoft does with Microsoft MVPs and what they do with a few other things that I think makes more sense, or where more people are at, where you don't necessarily go after the people creating reports. You go after the people who are using the reports, like understand the data, and allow them to be part of training their team on like what content's out there to kind of help promote, like, oh, this is the report you should use. One of them, we have our marketing champion, so to speak,
Hmm.
and they know the marketing data. So, and then that goes obviously into incentives, but they also kind of that liaison between what the pain points are, what are people asking for. That idea of this whole big COE where it comes to all these different report creators, again, I don't know if that's as plausible for a lot of people, especially when you're just starting out your data culture.
I don't think it really matters though. I mean, I think whether you're a small organization or a large organization, it does not matter. So inside the article that I sent out on the chat window, talking about the Center of Excellence establishment, right? One of their sections they have in there is called BI team roles. There's a program manager, and it talks about what their job is. What is a database lead? What they would do? What does an analytics lead look like? How does operations and infrastructure work? And then what does the support look like? So there's basically 5 roles they point out. Now, those 5 roles do not change. Like those are the 5 roles of what has to be accomplished when you're doing a BI initiative, regardless. Whether that's one person or
Mhm.
actual 5 people or teams of people that manage that, I think that really varies depending on the size of your organization, right? There comes a point in time when there's just so much work to do that you just can't be one person anymore. So I still think all this has to be done, right? There still needs to be someone to manage the work. There's got to be someone who understands the data. There's got to be someone who's doing the analytical things, and then maintaining and supporting where does this stuff get deployed and how do you govern it, right? So I don't think any of that stuff changes. I think it just changes between, is it that one person or is it 5 people?
Right. So, few things that I wanted to get your guys' reactions on what the adoption roadmap has for rewarding the COE and the members in it. Because obviously, the idea is like, let's say you're grabbing someone from each department that's not necessarily BI author or creator, and you want them to be involved, you want them to help train.
Hmm.
Obviously, that's going to take time and effort on their part. So, again, one we actually asked this to Melissa on Twitter when we had our first COE episode, and asked like, what are some actual incentives that make sense? So here are a few that are kind of outlined in the document. Rewarding champions more direct access to the COE,
Hmm.
having a champion of the month, a private discussion area, specialized deep dive and training. So, and then a few other things
I like
is
these incentives.
contests. Yeah, contest with a small gift or time off, a ranking, and leadership communication. Do those make sense to you? Or I guess my first reaction is that enough?
Well, I think this is way more thought out than I was thinking, actually.
Ah,
I was thinking much less of that. I mean, for me, so again, what motivates me, right? I think it also depends on the kind of people you're working with, right?
yeah.
If you're in a data culture where it's appropriate for you to hold back and keep everything close to the chest, I think it's going to be a bit harder to build out that center of excellence because people aren't as willing to share what they're doing. On the other hand, I feel like the center of excellence is a great help to people because it starts providing deeper data access to what I want to get daily, right? So I will be more than happy to work with another team if they can provide me the SQL tables or a deeper level of data that I can just use, right? If someone's
Okay.
going to own that, and if my participation telling you as the center of excellence, here's my pain points, here's what causes me issues. If you can remove some of my pain and then give me access to more and easier access to that data, I'll be very happy. I mean, I think that right there is a very big incentive in itself. I didn't even think about all the other incentives you're talking about. from a participation standpoint. Do you have a list of those items somewhere, Tommy? I want to read those. Is that
Yeah.
in the blog post?
So I sent, yeah, I'll put that out and it will be in the podcast episode description as well. So it's going to go on
So
YouTube
we're talking incentivizing people to engage with the COE.
Yeah.
or incentivizing the members to, I guess, keep
Keep
doing what they're
going.
doing. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm more of the stick than the carrot at this point in time. I think a lot of the things you mentioned were carrot carrot
Yeah.
based
There,
rewards. I'm thinking like I'm going to talk to their manager, and their manager is going to make sure that they
well,
spend an hour or two a week on their goals for the year. Like, so I'm thinking like this ties directly to like goals in the organization level, right? I mean, the company says data is important to us. Good reporting is important to us. So because of those two things, it should be part of, once you strategically identify people that are going to participate or would likely participate, right? You go to their manager and be like, "Hey, we're doing this thing. It's going to be awesome. We're gonna need some help. We're gonna need your expertise. Can we get this person for a couple hours a week or a couple hours a month to help participate? Um, Can we have you help us put it a part of their goals, right? I see this as being a really, maybe it's a selfish thing too, right? If I'm an employee in a company, I want to continue to grow. I don't want to just sit there and be stagnant. I want to keep being challenged. I feel like this is one of these areas where, yeah, of course I'd help out with that.
and I think I'm more with you, Mike, in terms of I think, oh yeah, a gift card for $25 at Olive Garden is for someone who's putting a lot of time into trying to promote it, or basically putting that effort in. For me, that wouldn't necessarily be enough if I was someone on that side of like it's not my department. Like if I liked BI, but obviously that's I have other things to do. I think yeah, it needs to be tied in with some organizational objectives too, and your own performance. Not necessarily like completely there. I think there's that mix of rewarding, but also responsibility. And I think that's part of the incentives too. It's not necessarily just rewarding someone, but the incentive to spend the time in it. And that's again couldn't be a stick too.
I like the incentive that you talked about was like access to higher level VPs and decision making things. And
Hmm.
Dan Meisner is actually putting a chat in the comment around this. He goes, you know, just being part of the decision making body, right? If you want to impact what the future of your work interface looks like, the opportunity to be part of a board that's doing reviews or things that you're going to, you know, um, assess, right? You're going to assess XYZ about these different BI tools in our company. What is how do you decide which data is the most important data in your organization? Someone's got to decide that. But not
Hmm.
everyone probably knows all the data that's happening inside the organization. So I feel like that's a really good seat at the table, is to be able to say, hey, look, you get a seat at the table, and you're going to be talking with and making presentations around VP, director level, higher end levels of the company. We're looking for your feedback to help participate there. I think that's an incentive in of itself.
Yeah, I think both those points are kind of similar from a um, getting people engaged perspective, right? Like if it's a goal within the company that every department have somebody that's part of the COE,
Yep.
like that's not really an option, right? So the incentive is, you got told to do it.
Voluntold.
However, like you could, yeah, voluntold. But the benefit of that though would be you would have access to the like centralized data, right?
Hmm.
Or and maybe that's the thing because you would the growth of that team or that body, right, would
Hmm.
be sharing a lot of the business knowledge across spectrums
Hmm.
so that as the organization starts to utilize better and better data sets and sources, you have these key members that are consistently not only helping each other but the rest of the organization. And I think there's a real opportunity there where when you have leaders from the different business areas or these individuals, right, and you're meeting on a somewhat regular basis, you can interject expertise or cross coverage or like show and tells kind of, right, or kind of the one of the charters of a COE is disseminating and sharing a lot of information and teaching people, right? And it goes a long way when the assumption here is that these are also your subject matter experts in the business areas,
It's
right?
true. It's true.
So it's an opportunity, I think, from a growth perspective for each business area to be able to like plug into the ones that they closely tie to and ensure that you're using the same data sets. The other thing that comes to mind here is like you could put um, maybe your COE is also somewhat that governance body of being able to certify data sets in some way, right? So if the organization is leveraging that capability of prioritizing how clean or how elevated a report is, if you're being tasked with ensuring that reports that you share as a business unit or a leader or whatever are eventually making their way to a level of certification, and the only path through that is the COE, well, then you have to participate.
Yeah.
And I think part of like why do you have to do the incentives in the first place? I think the big part is once you set something like this up and you say, "Hey, we have a COE. Do you want to be part of it?" The worst thing you do is set that up and then kind of it loses steam, so to speak. We did one of the things that I hope Microsoft translates or kind of converts is we talked about this a few weeks ago. The Power Apps has this adoptions power like slides, and it talks about like kind of all those things of the community, the hacker like a hackathon, and all these different like from the agenda based things, which I loved because I think once you set something like this up you got to keep people in a sense engaged. Like, hey, I'm part of
Agreed.
the COE, but I'm not doing anything. Like, because they're going to look to you for direction, right? They're not going to just randomly at every single meeting they have. It's like, hey, have you found Power BI? That's not their role. Um,
But
and so,
but I think in
yeah,
every I mean, not every department, but I definitely think there are pockets of people in your company, or there likely are pockets of people in company who are doing analytical things in there, no matter what. I mean, the harder part I think is um how do you identify where those users are, and can you okay, we're gonna go back to the three items here. It's people, process, and technology, right? PPT, the article we talked about like 2 weeks ago or whatever it was. But it's kind of one of those things, right? So if you can identify the people, is there a process in place that you've developed to enable those people and or managers, right, to have a high enough priority? And I think that some of that starts really at the executive leadership level, right? If you don't get buy-in at the higher end levels to say, yeah, this is worth our time, people can't spend effort on it to build what they need to build for the broader part of the organization, right? If a power hour every Friday is not going to fly, and they're like, why are you wasting your time? Well, this will never go anywhere. You're not getting the executive level buy-in.
Yeah, I mean, but at the same time, like if you do a power hour every week or twice a month, right? Like
Yeah.
the incentive, for people is is probably that told kind of thing as well, right? Like if you're running 24 power hours in a year, the expectation is that the people that are working with data and Power BI should attend at least 70% of them or something. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Like that should be one of their yearly goals, because you as an organization are investing in the COE to some level where you're freely sharing knowledge and helping people do their jobs better,
Yep.
right? So
Yep.
it's on company time. It's not really you know
What what if the center of excellence? I mean, what if it? Oh man, this is going very off the deep end here to some point, but like I'm thinking incentives, right? What incentivizes me to do things like I do stupid amounts of things to get this MVP jacket.
right.
Right? I
Well,
mean, what if I mean, does okay, I'm going to ask it to the chat window, right? Does anyone have an organization? Is there anything in the organization like, "Hey, you get if you participate this once a quarter, you get $100 gift card to go to the company store and pick off some company swag that you want to wear, or we go get some, custom branded t-shirts with your company's logo and, data experts, or like I think there's like even some there was
oh,
even like a little
swag.
swag. I
yeah,
don't know,
swag.
man.
That's how
I
it
will tell
works.
you,
People will do stuff
and
for
you know that,
things. Yeah.
but that what was it? This actually did happen in one of the companies I was at. Like you could, if you went through this training
Yep.
and um passed their test, and it wasn't just an easy thing, right? It was probably a good like 2-month course and whatnot. There was this sweet jacket, like
Mm-hmm.
just thin kind of
I
like
know.
jacket, and the people that wore it,
Yep.
it's
From
like,
that
oh
team.
man, they got that.
Yeah.
Like, oh, I want that, and
Yep.
you put in the time
Well,
for
what else?
some stuff like that.
Oh,
So
totally. But like,
yeah.
there's two things that go along with that, right? There's so it. Wow. Okay. So totally random thought, but like this does two things, right? If you can incentivize your team, you give them some rewards like that, right? Tangible rewards, um, to be able to participate in that way. In addition to that, now you have other people asking, like, "Where'd you get that cool jacket? Where'd that come from?" And so now you have people engaging. Well, I engage in that. It now becomes a conversation piece that you can use to kind of bring along other individuals.
Well,
You're not going to go around and be like, "Hey, I'm part of the COE. I'm COE. Like, come hang out with me. We're in the
No,
CE." Like,
except no one's gonna see it on Zoom. So,
well,
but
but at the same
anymore.
time,
Yeah.
at the same time, like if the intent is to share best practices within an organization, right? Like, do you set up some sort of, you know, tiered kind of training, type of thing or course type thing where people go through the course, and then and or at certain levels, you know, volunteer for time or tasks or something
mhm.
to share
it's like
key things
it's like
throughout the
Boy Scouts.
organization, or earn your badge kind of thing,
Yeah.
Uh huh.
right?
And I think we're
and
speaking
then
about
and
yeah.
then
Go ahead.
maybe that trickles upwards,
Yep.
I mean, you're talking scales, right?
Yeah.
I'm
Yeah.
thinking of like really large organizations where it's like everybody can get the 1 star, right?
Yep.
Like you have to put in some time to get the 2 star. Like you're serious about it if you're at the 3 star,
Mhm.
and then by the time you get to like the highest level on a yearly basis,
Yeah.
maybe those are where the big things happen, and you get your name in the cookie jar, and at the end of the year somebody gets some mega prize or something like that,
I mean, when I
right?
was
Like those are
yeah.
all ways to gamify,
Yep. Yeah. I like the
an
gamify.
activity and things like that,
Yep.
and then it starts over the next year.
I did
Well,
a workshop
yeah.
with when I was at Johnson
I'm gonna go do
Controls.
this. I'll see you guys later. I guess for something.
But when I was at Johnson Controls, I did this thing called it was like the innovation. They had an innovation center, is where they had this like special room that was like it was a building they bought away from their normal place, and you would go there to like work on innovative things. And you went through innovation training, and they had this little certificate. Like they would handpick people across the company who were like kind of movers and shakers, right? People who were kind of loud and boisterous who were doing data things, right? And they brought them all to this workshop, and it was like they brought people in, they developed this workshop, and the idea was to continually foster innovation across all parts of the organization. So it was a cross company portion of the team, people from different teams. You got together, you did workshops, you learned how to work together. It was very out of your normal workflow, but man, it was fun. I learned a ton of stuff to that, and a lot of the things that I talk about, like, hey, we're going to do a dashboard session. Like a lot of the techniques that I learned on how to do group thought sessions together came out of that innovation thing that I went through. So being able to offer, like, one, it was fun for me to do, but two, it was like a career builder for me, right? It added a skill set to me that other people in the organization didn't have and could go through in the future. So I felt, and they did guide classes, and every year they had like a graduating class of a couple people who did this thing, and then it was really cool. A lot of ideas for the company actually came out. They started making a lot of business proposals that actually turned into applications, products, other things within the company that came from that innovation center. So it's like, yeah, so like Joe says, it's like a skunk works to some degree.
So, question: when you did that innovation, was it for Power BI? Or was it just like
Nope.
kind of
General, it was
okay?
like general company, like it was, company objectives, right? So how do you, like, end of the day, right? You have a company, you have XYZ products, right? How do you get people together to produce the next great idea that you're going to productize, or something you're going to, like, where's the pain points, right? Part of this starts with, a lot of this workshop was around like creating that user journey, that user story, understanding what that is. How do you create one? How can you walk through your current experience? And so they had these little groups of people that would sit down and say, okay, here's how we order products. Here's how we go to sales. Let's role play this a little bit. How does this work today? And then you think about how does it work today, and then you create inventions or create ideas. Doesn't have to even be real. Could never be possible. But you're just throwing like interesting things at the wall, and sometimes some of those ideas, as crazy as they may sound, actually stick. And you start thinking, well, maybe we should build that. okay, out of the 10 ideas we have here from this innovation session, maybe 3 of these are worth actually spending time. Can we physically make this happen? Is this a product we could actually build and or sell? What's the cost with that? And then you can you can basically spin that off into another team that can then start really researching and figuring out, does that product or idea seem viable for your company? It was a great experience. I super loved it. A lot of great people there. I'm guessing, I don't know if anyone else has done this from their, I'm guessing there's companies that do this to some degree, that you could hire them and come in and they could do these sessions for your company. But um, Johnson Controls had made their own group around all of this.
And I think we're speaking about, we need to define the audiences here. And I think there's two kind of personas that are part of the COE. We've talked about like if you attend a training or if you go to the POW hours to get a t-shirt. And I think that's maybe for like the general audience to, be, I guess, attendees in part of the COE, because in a sense, like, the random product teams manager, right? But I think that there's that other side too of, I think, what we call champions. Like I think you have the COE and then you have these champions who again are the voice of that team's data, and also, like they work in their department. Like I'm a campaign manager, but I just happen to love Power BI, right? And I think, again, to Microsoft's point, like one thing that we've actually tried is we've done private preview programs
Hmm.
where we're going to release a new feature, like feature kind of thing, or like a new report design, or just something that we were working on, and we basically, requested to the company, like, do you want to be part of this sign up to be a part of the Power BI apps private preview program to get their feedback. And people love to be kind of like, like, so there, I think the people who are interested in Power BI that don't necessarily work in it are the same people who like to try new things out. I think there's that curiosity thing too. So
I don't know. I think it depends. I think there are some people who are not happy to learn and just kind of want to do their thing. I think there are other individuals that are
sure.
more interested to experience things they haven't done before. I mean, I'm probably a weirdo in that respect, right? I love challenges. I love things that are hard. I like thinking on things that are just I've never done before. So that intrigues my mind. I go that direction. I know there's a lot of people who don't enjoy those extra hard things. They want to know what they got to do, get it done, and then let me
Sure.
rinse, wash, and repeat that over and over again. So I don't think every personality is great inside this center of excellence. And I hear some things in the chat right now. Some people are making the distinction between a COP and a COE, and this is Dan, I think, vocalizing his difference there. The COP would be community of practice, and the COE is the community center of excellence. And I'd be curious your thoughts on you guys as well. Like, do you see a distinction? Look, do you see a distinction between the COP and COE? And would you have both of them, or would you only have a center of excellence, or only have a center of practice, a community of practice? And what Dan, I think, saying in the chat here is he's kind of alluding to, like, right, the center of practice is the community that your company runs, right? The community of people who do Power BI, right? There's a community around that. And then the center of excellence is more of like a governing body. That the center of excellence is the team that builds and or develops the standards, the processes, the things
Yeah.
that happen to develop good BI practices in your company. What do you think?
I think that I still consider, like, in a sense, the center of excellence as, like that main, like it's really like almost like a site. It's a repository. Community of practice is, that's really data governance, and I think kind of falls into that. I think you need to have something named governance. I
I don't think Microsoft talks to the center community of practice. I think if you read the documentation that
Much,
Microsoft
right? Yeah.
I think if you
I
read the documentation from Microsoft, they're pointing. I think they're thinking the same one and the thing. It's a COE and COP. It's the same kind of object.
But at the same time, like to me, that's also kind of what you were saying with this, while it's COE specific, hard at the center and flexible at the core,
Yep.
right?
Yep.
It's just an extension of that. You're hardened more at the COE, and the COP kind of is the flex part within the
Mhm.
organization.
Mhm.
It also is I mean, it's an extension of a good COE, right? You're getting people who are part of that, but at the same time, the more people that are um engaged as you know and understand more of what you're trying to do within the organization, those could be COP members, right? And sharing, disseminating. It's also, I think, a feeder for the COE, right? Like I think Dan also asked, like, hey, who should be on the COE? Is it the old gray, is it one of us, like, or
Yep.
is it the younger guy,
Yep.
or person, right? Like the point is like it's the expertise in Power BI, I think, or whatever technical tool or understanding, I think, that would require an individual that may not have the years of experience to actually become a COE member, because you might want
Mm,
that fresh perspective of how to engage with the organization better. But at the same time, like, in general, I would probably say most of your COE members are going to have some years on them, because
Mhm.
it's the experience and of like, kind of like we talk about, we have different experiences, but there's many years of implementation experience where you're trying different things to spread and uh, get larger groups of people to organize around and use data in the most effective and efficient ways. And that's not always easy, obviously, because we
if it was
talk about stuff all the time and we come up with things,
if it was
right?
easy, everyone would be doing
So
it.
I think that's how I would answer it in kind of two different ways. One is maybe solve some of your, like, COE, who's on the COE, and graduate through the layers of, well, if you're coming out of nowhere, join the community of practice, like, be part of this body, help share, and
Mm-hmm.
and as leaders start to show within that group, maybe they are candidates to increase or join the COE, when the time comes,
So
because it's really
I'm going to correct
go ahead.
myself here. Dan says there is a center of practice and a center of excellence called out in the adoption roadmap, and I was wrong. I could not find it because I was googling it real quick, trying to zoom around the website. So I am wrong. Dan was right. There is 2 pages, one for each of them, and they
Too,
do have different
too bad.
definitions.
Too bad there wasn't a dinner bet on that or
Yeah, good
something.
thing you guys would have won another steak out of me. Yeah.
So, man, I'm still just bugged. Like a COE just sounds like it's, hey, visit our COE. It doesn't sound like people. I do like that distinction. That's my own issue that I'll deal with on the side. But I do like that idea though of like the community of practice for the people who are building, uh, and for the people who are involved in the data, like in the data flow, whether you're the data engineer, your report author, you're an analyst, kind of like, analyzing the data. That community of practice is the standards and process. I like the center of excellence for a play. It's something you visit, but I think when it comes to the people making decisions, I think that's still more like the data governance committee and the whole structure basically not dictates, but what comes from there flows into the community of practice. Where what pain points do we have? Like,
Yep.
hey, we need better content organization. We need a better naming convention.
Yep.
So let's build that into our community of practice.
Well,
Community
community
of
practice
practice is
volunteers, right? Center of excellence would be like
Yeah.
paid people to be in part of that
Yeah.
group potentially, and that's like
Right.
maybe this is the difference between COE is your goals for the year, right? That's part of your goals. Be part of the COE. Maybe a community practice isn't necessarily tied to your goals for the year.
I don't know. Well, again, words have meaning. A community of practice. So practice is what you're normally doing. This is where basically you're finding out, in a sense, your standardizations, what themes you use, like what data sets do we need to connect to, the kind of the workflow of ingesting and analyzing data in your organization. Again, a center of excellence is again more of your repository of news for the company. That's to me what makes more sense, because you want everyone in a sense to be part of the center of excellence or to visit it, because it's your knowledge sharing. It's where everything's hosted for
But that's an output of the COE. That's
per-
people
so,
consuming an output of what you're saying a good COE
yeah.
would be doing. That's not the COE, right? Like, if we're talking about funded individuals, there are a group of people who are trying to create knowledge centers. And if you said SharePoint is one of yours, cool,
It's
right?
Confluence,
Like,
but
what I'm saying though
Yep.
is, like, that's a byproduct of what that team is trying to accomplish to bring everybody onto the same page.
Agreed.
It is not the 5 people that are the COE, where they're deeply tied into trying to disseminate and break down these barriers within an organization. The community of practice is not funded, right?
Correct.
It should be hopefully a byproduct of the COE
It
in that you
mentors.
have domain experts that are
I think so.
actually like building things, and maybe the COE is helping facilitate, trainings,
Yep.
or giving them material to, do power hours with, or whatever the case may be. But like, those are people who are passionate about what they're doing enough to engage, I would think, in something, and say, hey, you're a community of practice member, right? And maybe this is like that swag thing,
Yep.
right? Like, you want to do this, you have to go through these trainings, you have to understand what you're doing in order to be part of, this
Another
initial
level.
tier,
Yeah.
right?
Mhm.
And then as you progress, maybe that's where more of the incentivization is in getting people to volunteer more of their time around becoming domain experts. And then as you engage or put more things out, the deeper the engagement, the better the swag or something.
So humor me for a second. I'm a general consumer of reports at my company. I want to learn about where the power hours are, and I also want to learn basically like understand how to use Power BI. Where do I go? Where am I
COE.
going? Do see
COE should be generating content to
okay,
tell you like key
okay,
things. Now, I don't know how to write a DAX formula. I can't figure it out, right? Maybe
but I
that's
don't
where I go,
need to.
but maybe I go to the community of practice and ask that question there, and someone else in my cubicle or my area says, "Hey, I've already written something like that here. Let me teach you that." Right? That's you're fostering the community of other people training other people in the company, right? You can't have this whole we're going to teach everything from one central body anymore because it's too expensive to do that, right? You want people to self train, right? I imagine myself in this picture, right? I'm looking at myself in the lens of like a company, right? Man, I love Mike Carlo because he works all day on data and doing things at the company level, and then he goes home and he builds himself a website. And he goes home and like on evenings and in extra hours and like on weekends, he still plays with Power BI, right? From a company perspective, wow, that guy's really valuable now because they're spending time. Like, I don't have to pay him for him to learn these other skills that are making our company better. Like, that's the kind of people I want to be around. So I think, you know, the community of practice, right, is informed by the Center of Excellence, but the Center of Excellence is doing the governance pieces.
So I just sent an article in the chat, and it's from our one of our best people, Chuck Sterling, and this was in 2016. And he talks about like how does Microsoft actually drive adoption, and he basically, if you actually go through this, it's basically a COE. And because it's all the support resources and promotion materials. You say basically like what they do that for in within Microsoft again at the time in 2016 that they were promoting Power BI is subject matter experts,
Yep.
which is kind of now like when we're talking about our that data champion of the internal website, and they kind of always designated with like BI at Microsoft. So if your company was yeah, like Rockwell, like BI at Rockwell, service and support, a community, and like the program management. That to me sounds exactly like a COE.
You're right. I mean, like
Yeah.
anything like that, a Center of Excellence is, if you look at the Microsoft article around what they're talking about for Center of responsibilities, their responsibility is mentoring the internal Power BI community, the community of practice. Their responsibility is producing, curating, and promoting training materials, right? Giving people the right, this is how we do business with Power BI, creating documentation and resources for standards, applying and
Mm-hmm.
communicating around governance guidelines, right? What is the company policy around publish to web? When do we use it? Who can get access to it? Like those are the kind of things. These are things that are core to like you have to communicate these things to the broader part of the community. Handling and assisting with oversight and administration, right? Something goes down, you need gateways, right? You're probably going to the Center of Excellence and saying, we need these gateways. And the Center of Excellence saying, well, we don't do gateways. You have to move to the cloud, right? Or whatever that thing is, right? They're the ones kind of setting the standards for the company at that point, right? They're kind of in charge of making sure this thing lives on.
I'm
What's
gonna,
interesting is
yeah.
there's a part of an article around funding with the COE that almost makes it
Oh, yep.
seem like this. Um, I, I'm lost with the analogy, but kind of like the main gear that goes around all the other gears,
The
right?
Sun Gear,
Because if they are if the COE represents, the organizational best practices,
hub and
there's
spoke.
there's there yeah there's still departmental like
Pieces.
tons of a departmental activity going on,
Yep.
right? And either I guess you try to like, well, you couldn't. This small group of people almost seems to like, be rolling around each one of these departments to clean up the mess or bring them in line with or the organization and then move on to the next one, all while compiling, I guess, some overarching um, standards and practices that you want everybody to follow. But at the same time, if it's a singular group that's just kind of going around, that's also how it's funded to some degree, right?
Yes. Yeah.
Is if Q1 we're in marketing and then we roll off into Q2 and now we're in sales, and then you roll off and you're in Q, like you're working with your COP or the people that are in there, developing. You're probably reanalyzing how they're doing things, pulling in different data sources, fixing something, like helping them correct their space to the point where you have an entire organization that is all up on the up and up, I guess you would say, with plugging into the right stuff. I don't know.
I
It's an interesting thought as far as like standing one up, and then how does that expand or grow?
mean, I definitely think it's needed. Again, I think the trickiest part here is how do you fund it, right?
Right.
Does each of the businesses that need to have access to data, do they pitch in a little bit for like a head count? How does that work? I mean, yeah, I think that's tricky. And a lot of what I think what you see traditionally, right, is everything's great from an idealistic standpoint, but when it comes down to like the money, where do you charge the head count to? Who's paying for that head count, right? Where does that come from? I think it gets a lot more picky because we're like, well, I don't want to pay for that, but I want all the data. So, I want all the toppings, but I don't want to pay for them, kind
Right.
of thing. So like I think it gets a bit tricky there to figure out how to handle those things. Interesting.
Yeah. So I think for me, when we're regardless from the incentives or the rewards, the focus is on the audience, right? So if it's the general consumer,
Agreed.
and those like you need the incentives for someone who's not necessarily interested or like that engaged. Maybe they're overwhelmed with Power BI. They use it when they need to, but there's incentives for them to be, start using like join our Power Hour, and for the contest to get free swag. The next level is that, in a sense, that champion or that person who is interested and competent using Power BI as a consumer. So getting them more involved to help promote it, getting their feedback, and then providing features for them. And then the I don't want to say the last level, but the most advanced level is the people who are going to make an impact, whether it's the Power BI report authors, people making decision on the data.
Hmm?
They also need their, and this is executive leadership, but they also need their own incentives too. And not just once a year, but like kind of on an ongoing basis based on what the objectives are. And I think once the first thing, regardless of any of the incentives that we've talked about, you have to define the objectives for each of those tiers. Like, what are you trying to achieve in the next 3 months and a year for each of those tiers, for the consumers, for your champions, and for your, as Dan says, the very distinct community of practice and center of excellence.
Well, then,
But
Well, I
if
mean,
you,
you'd send out a survey at the end of the year, wouldn't you, Tommy?
right, or
yeah, I
every
would
quarter you send
actually.
out a survey,
So,
or
But I want to address the point though, right? Like, do you like obviously I think you have somewhat of larger nebulous goals, right? Because
mhm,
you're not going to be able to like nail a metric with unless you're like I don't know how you would off the top of my head, but I think we danced around a perfect example of COE, COP, and
mhm,
technical users and implementers. It's the same model that the MVP program has.
yep,
COE is the Microsoft folks who engage with us. We are the
mhm,
COP. We just love the tool, love the people,
I give
love
it.
the community.
We give a swag and we
Share
do it.
share it out, and like how many different ways like are there incentives to
Yep.
become an MVP, right? Or
Yep.
have the title.
right,
Like is it it's almost enough, right? But the value is in the membership of the COP. Like it's in the engagement of people, like-minded people,
right,
that is the value. And maybe that's what you start to foster in organizations is the COP gets to go to meetings, not the technical users, or the COP are the ones that get to present, you know, like, because those are the passionate group of people that you're trying to have become leaders within your organization of sharing good practices, right? And if it's the COP power hour with the COE, and then that juxtaposes with the larger audience or something, I don't know, there's a million different ways you can split the hair, but the principle is the same in creating communities of people that engage with each other to make business better because they love the tool, they love, you know, data, they love what it can do for an organization. And the more you have of that, the more valuable your business becomes across the board, because you've empowered and impassioned people within your organization.
I like this. I think what you
Yeah.
described, Seth, is very closely tied to one of the images on the community of practice page, where they actually have the Center of Excellence called out. Center of Excellence integrates with a couple champions of content creators, the COP, right? So there's going to be a couple people that bubble to the top of like these are the leaders of the community of practice, right? So you integrate with them kind of very closely, right? Those champions can go out there. There may be like one person from each organization, right? It's your hub and spoke model, right? The hub is the center of excellence. The spokes become your champions in the community of practice. Those champions then teach and help and aid other subject matter experts and content creators across the organization, right? So they're kind of more of that. They get that direct access to the center of excellence, and then the center of excellence has this feeder to like the content consumers, like all the like what Tommy does, right? Tommy makes a report, he does a video on it, right? Tommy is the center of excellence. Tommy's creating, this is the report, this is how it works, this is how you use it, right? That's the documentation that goes along with that. That's then publicly available to the rest of the organization, and everyone else can go consume that. It's I'm changing my tune here a lot because I was thinking not about the COP at this point. I was actually thinking more about the center of excellence being kind of more of this loosey goosey like area where people participate and you incentivize them to participate to be part of the center of excellence. But I think what you guys are describing to me and what makes sense now is that's a bit more of a formalized team, and it's the community of practice where you can start getting more of the volunteer space.
And I think, Seth, you made a really good point. I think that's what I've actually tried to replicate too with Microsoft's MVP program. Has obviously worked for quite a while. And just like you said, Mike, we put so much work in to get renewed every year. There's a reason. There's the features, I think they do a great job of the preview programs to, I think there's definitely a credibility, or you know it means something to be honored with the MVP reward. And they've done a great job of, in a sense, creating something out of nothing. Because
Mm-hmm.
when you actually think what an MVP is, it's you didn't go to school for it, but it feels like one of the, yeah. To me, Microsoft's done a great job of that idea of how do we get people to promote our material for us. Here's some features and incentives. Now we can promote. Now these people, we can promote themselves.
But I mean, there are people out there. So let me bring your analogy a little bit further, Tommy. I like where you're going with that. The MVP program is around people who are very active in the community, but they weren't just. I mean, some people were probably active in the community to get to become an MVP, and they become an
Mm-hmm.
MVP for a year, and they did it. They check the box and they move on, right? But there are other
Sure.
MVPs that have been MVPs for multiple years. They love speaking. They love what they're doing. They like the tools. They're very passionate about, like, that's what kind of is a thread inside their career, right? And I think to that point though, like I think of an MVP as these are individuals that would probably do this content regardless, with or without the MVP program. The MVP
Sure.
program basically just gives them a title and aligns them a bit more with what Microsoft is doing. But I mean, shoot, if I wasn't an MVP, I'd still be talking about Power BI, I'm pretty sure. I'd still be blogging about it. I'd be making videos on how to do things in it. I don't think that changes what I would do. So I think to that point though is to add into your thought there is I think you're just finding people who are already doing what you want to do and you're reinforcing the behavior potentially and maybe steering it a little bit, but you're reinforcing it to a degree to help them be more successful, right? You want to amplify those voices who are going in the right direction
Right.
of where you're going. Thoughts? Or I just end it?
I think we misnamed the podcast, and it should have been incentives for the COP.
I think you're right, and that's what I was going with earlier. I think it should have been incentives for the COP. I mean, I would love, shoot, have ask me to participate in
Either
a
way, we answered
COP
that question.
and give me a pizza. I would love a free lunch, right? Show up to a free lunch here, and you'll get people to show up. Hey, we're gonna do a
But in the same way, like think about that. Like you could technically have the same sort of um like nebulous yearly activities, if you want to remain a COP member,
yep.
right?
So,
Like
oh, yep,
you could do that within an organ. You could be, or within your COP you have the champions,
correct.
or something like
Yeah.
that.
Yep, exactly. And maybe you groom the champions from the COP community and they become, maybe key members of what the Center of Excellence becomes when your organization gets large enough, right? Maybe that
Yep.
informs some of that. I think I don't know, maybe I think there's like rough terms here, but I think some of this depends could be very fluid depending on where you're at in your organization. All right.
Right, and how large it is, right? Like this
Agreed.
gets fun. This gets fun, I think, in larger organizations, right? Where you'd have a much larger pool to choose from, um, creating not level, like, yeah, you're leveling up to some degree,
Yeah.
and then there's a couple things related to, um, people enjoy distinction, being
Mhm.
distinct in some ways, so if you only have,
Yep.
a champion that comes out of, a group, or you have, 10 different, particular business units or areas, then and that means there's 10 champions, and that's it per year. Like, that's an
Ooh.
exclusivity club,
Ooh.
right? That there's something to that you get the special jacket. That doesn't mean you don't have larger, community of practice members,
Yep.
but
Yep.
are you one of the ones that is consistently the loudest voice, or teaching, and doing additional meetings, or whatever the case may be,
Yeah,
right? I
I
think
like
there's a
that.
lot of fun that could be done there, because that's directly drawing on some of the same principles that we're very familiar with.
Yep.
There's many ways to skin the cat, as far as, how do you, uh, you know, what things do you have to do to attain an MVP?
Mhm.
Well, like, there is no like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 step thing.
Nope.
Intentionally,
Yep.
right? It's you're a subject matter expert. You deliver and make the biggest community and share your knowledge with other people.
Yep.
And if that garners enough interest from people, and you're making an impact, then, like, there's a chance or a probability that you will get rewarded, right? Like,
Exactly right.
that's about as hard as you get,
Yeah.
so you don't have to have, like, the same sort of, well, you have to do these 10 things, and that's how you become a champion. No, it's this nebulous thing, and it gets awarded to 10 people who are the highest COP members.
It would be good to do that if you're gonna do something like that, have at least somewhat of a clear bar that you need to hop over. I
Yeah,
think
I get it. You can be much much clearer.
yeah, like, but I mean, to your point though, like too, it could be, yeah, I think that's a very good point there as well. And you don't want it to be like the old friends club either, right? You want to keep having fresh
Yeah,
ideas. You want it to kind
exactly,
of,
exactly.
you know,
Yep,
make it so you can only do it for a year or 2 years at a time. Like, when you're
yep.
done your year, you're done. Like, we go find 10 new people, right? We give other people opportunities to kind of keep it alive. That's interesting. Well, I think we've burned it. I mean, if you guys want to wrap up some final thoughts here, what would be, whether you're incentivizing a center of excellence or community of practice, it sounds like we've kind of refined our ideas slightly here. What would be like one of your, Tommy, give us one of your takeaways. What would be your incentive that would work for you?
I think regardless of what avenue you go, the first step that you need to have is what is your objective for that particular audience or
Hmm.
effort that you're doing, and then that's where the incentives are going to flow. So understanding who that person is and what's going to incentivize them, whether it's a little carrot, little stick,
Yep.
but understand like how do you align that reward with what you're trying to get them to do.
So what's your incentive, Tommy? Like if
Yeah.
someone's getting Tommy to participate in the COP or COE, what is Tommy's reward? Like what motivates you to participate?
So for me, it would be having feedback, being able to basically provide feedback or have a say in the direction of
Hmm?
how the report should look.
Okay.
So basically having the voice heard and influencing that.
Seth,
That's a good one. That's a good one. So you'd
Yeah.
basically say that the
access.
champions get exclusive access to the
Yes.
COE.
Yeah.
Exactly. Exactly. And also can help direct how things are going to look, like a format pane or something. So.
Oh,
That's a very
Seth, what would be yours? What would be what would incentivize Seth to participate and play in this arena?
I'm with Tommy. Like
Same thing.
I think the exclusivity thing comes a long way.
Yep.
Money's a cheap answer. I don't think that actually, like, if you can inherently find people's passion around data and kind of cultivate it
Yep.
within an organization, man, that's one of the most powerful things.
Mhm.
And we've even seen that in our lives. Like you say, even a technical tool in Power BI.
Yep.
Like if 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 a normal consumer embraces that technology and learns it and grows within it, like we are living examples of how far you
Yeah.
can take that. It's still a game changer in an org. It's still
Mhm.
an amazing tool that lets you become a much more effective problem solver. So like I fostering growth within here is sort of the funding, right?
Okay. I'm going to be very shallow here. I'm going to say if you give me a free meal, you have
Ching ching,
ching,
dollar bill.
dollar bills. Give me a free meal, right? Have pizza hosted in a room once a month or something like that. Hey, come participate. Get your free meal. I'll show up. I'll do things. I'll try and help out. Like
Yeah.
that for me, that's a motivator, and I'd show up and help and participate. And it's always like at companies, when I actually went into companies and don't just work at my house anymore. I mean, you actually had to go somewhere. You'd have to leave to go find lunch somewhere or bring your own lunch or whatever. It's just kind of a fun community happens. I feel like around food, and this is maybe just my Italian part of me. Like just you put food around, people will talk and share, and like that would kind of be fun. So, yeah,
But I think all these are byproducts of a COE doing a good job,
agree.
right?
Yeah.
Yeah,
When you start to foster a community or practice or a CO, like when you start trying to implement things in organization, the more fun you make them,
yep,
the more interesting they are to people, the more all of a sudden those communities start growing on
like it.
their own.
Yeah, definitely like it. Awesome. Well, with that, we've wasted another good hour, a full hour this time. We got through the whole
Yeah,
thing
right.
without having any technical issues, so we're very happy about that. Thank you all for participating and listening. Our only ask, if you listen to the podcast, is please just share it with somebody else. Communicate it on social networks. If you have someone at work that may be enjoying Power BI, if you're running a COP or COE in your organization, and this might be a good opportunity. Share the link inside your knowledge base. Like put the link inside your documentation. Hey, this is a great podcast, has some insightful things. They don't steer you wrong too often. Throw something out there. And if you want to listen to the podcast, Tommy, where can you find us?
Man, I have so many notes from today. If you are watching live, listen, subscribe on Apple and Spotify. On Spotify, you can actually now leave a rating on podcast. So please do
Woo.
so. It really helps us out a lot. If you're listening, join the conversation live every Tuesday and Thursday on YouTube and LinkedIn on Power BI Tips. And again, contest goes till Wednesday at midnight Central Time. So
Awesome. So go ahead and share those links. Use the link that Tommy gives you. Tommy, can you drop the link really quickly into the chat window before people leave here, just to make sure we've got it for people who are
yep.
still hanging around in the chat? Share this link with the hashtag explicit measures, and we will pick a winner and start giving out some swag.
You
Thank you.
have to use the hashtag or we're not going to find it.
We
So
can't find it unless you use a hashtag. So make sure you hashtag the link. So
Twitter and LinkedIn. Yep.
there's the link. Make sure you hashtag it explicit measures on LinkedIn and which platforms you talking about, Tommy?
Twitter and LinkedIn.
Twitter and
because
LinkedIn.
I don't really have Facebook.
We don't have anything else. Tommy doesn't Facebook. Anyways, thank you all very much. I appreciate your time, guys. It was a lot of fun. We'll talk to you soon.